just get to take. Okay, but then one of the questions, well, where are connection fees headed into the future? Now again, remember, if you're already connected, you're not paying these connection fees. These are really for new users or existing users who are going to go through some kind of expansion and increase their discharge. That we're proposing no increase in the connection fee rates until 1920. That's because the chloride facilities aren't even constructed till then. They don't come online. And so, you know, if you're supposed to be paying for facilities that are already there and it's not there, why would you include it in the connection fee? So we're proposing not until 1920. And then we're talking about, after that, phasing in it over time, that as the loans get repaid, each time the loan portion of the loan gets repaid, we would phase in another increment of the connection fee and pay it over time. Okay? One of the questions, why are we implementing rates for 6 years? Why don't we set them more frequently? Why don't we do it every year? Why don't we do it every 2 years or every 3 years? Why go all 6 years? Well, again, we talked about showing good faith efforts to the regional board. And what they've indicated to us is they want to see that we've implemented a financial plan that would fully finance the compliance project. We're planning to do that through the SRF loan program, and lenders basically require the borrower to demonstrate that they can repay the loan. And they look at that as, well, what year do you have your maximum debt service? And have you set a rate that'll cover that? Because they want to be sure they're going to get repaid. And so it kind of defines, this is the level of the rate you have to have. It doesn't say whether I have to do it over 1 year or 6 years or 10 years, whatever it could be. So we could adopt rates over a shorter time frame. You'd still have to get up to that high rate. But if you said, let's do it in 3 years, well, then the rate increase each year is going to be a lot steeper. We wanted to minimize that, and so we spread it over 6 years. Now, the question might be, well, why not then let's do it over 10 years or 20 years? Well, you have to do it by the time you start making your debt repayments, and those debt repayments start in year 6. That's why we're proposing a 6-year rate increase. Okay, we'll come to this in a second. One other question, I didn't put a slide together on it. There was a question about, do future rates include inflation? There was, unfortunately, we did the presentation to the board 2 different times. One time, the footnote got inadvertently left off the slide, and it showed, it had a footnote that said, yeah, these rates will include inflation as we move forward. We showed it without inflation because the message at that point we were trying to convey was that once we get up to the full debt service repayment, the capital component of the service charge doesn't keep growing, and we sort of reaches a steady state. So it was an unfortunate thing that happened. We do in all of our projections, there is inflation moving forward. I didn't show all those rates because there's a lot of different calculations. Alan has graciously agreed to sit down with me tomorrow. We're going to go through all the details and the ins and outs of the spreadsheets and the budgets and the numbers, and I didn't think everybody wanted to sit through hours and hours of detailed spreadsheet calculations. But those are available. We do have the data, and Alan and I are going to sit down tomorrow and go through those. Now, you know, you're always free to contact us if you get home tonight and you think, boy, I have some burning question, or I'd like to find out more. A lot of different ways you can do it. We have a toll-free phone number. You can call us at any time. We have an email. You can email us. We'll respond to you. Our website, we have a lot of different information. Like I said, we have a video of the whole information meetings that we've held, so you can see all of that. It has information about the chloride project. It has a section on how to protest. It has a downloadable protest form that you can fill out. I think we even have some in the back, but we have a form that, you know, an easy, simple form, download it and send it in. We have information on the low water rebate program. There's stuff where you can look up your parcel, find out the charge on your parcel, particularly if you have a commercial parcel, tell you what square footage you have, what the rates are, all that sort of thing. So a lot of information on the website. And with that, if you have questions, comments, you know, we're here as long as Alan will let us answer questions. Mrs. Dunn.
Well, good evening. I was at your first meeting, and I had asked about the developers and why they wouldn't be having higher development connection fees until 2019 or 2020, and you did explain that. But I was thinking what they've done in the past with the Castaic Lake Water Agency when they wanted to have their connection fees, they rushed to do it before the new charges were going to be put on. And that may happen again in this situation, because I know they don't want to pay those higher amounts, and they have done that in the past. Now, the other thing or two other items, your fixed interest on those particular loans. Do you have any idea what those fixed interest charges would be?
Yep, okay, two different questions.
And I got one more.
Okay.
Okay, and then on your charts, and I had to think about this when I went home, you were showing apples and oranges as far as who was paying how much per month or per year from Lancaster to our area. Lancaster was higher, but also I don't think it was being compared correctly, because they are only doing tertiary level. We are talking about RO, which is more expensive, and we also did not look at what the size of their project was compared to the size of our project. So I think that those numbers could be skewed. And so those are my thoughts.
Okay, let me address them one at a time. In terms of developers coming in and the idea of them coming and saying, boy, I'm going to connect now and I'm going to beat the connection fee rate increase, that in this case doesn't really work, because once they connect, they become then their existing users, and now they're going to pay part of the debt service every one of those 30 years. They're going to pay their proportionate share of the debt service on paying for the chloride. So whether they pay it as a connection fee or whether they pay it on their service charge, they're still going to pay for their share of the debt service. They don't escape from having to pay for part of the chloride project. They don't get it for free. That was never the intent. And so it doesn't help them to come in early as opposed to later, vice versa, that the later they come in, they pay for more of the chloride project on their connection fee, less on their service charge. The earlier they come in, they pay more on the service charge, less on the connection fee, but ultimately they pay their fair share. Interest rates, good, thank you. I do the third question, I was drawing a blank, so thank you. Interest rates. In our projections, we've assumed an interest rate of 2.9%. Actually, right now, the most recent state loans we've gotten, the interest rate has been around 1.9%. So they've actually been lower. We're trying to budget conservatively, so that we're thinking they'll probably creep upwards a little bit, but we assume 2.9%. If the interest rate comes in lower when we actually sign the loan contracts and get the money, we'll adjust the service charge rates accordingly. But right now we're assuming 2.9%. In terms of comparing rates against other agencies, it is a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison. What we tried to do, though, was not so much say, this is, our rates are better than these, and so therefore we have a reason to raise the rates. What we were trying to focus on was more the question, are we doing something right? I mean, most people don't have a feel of what does it cost to run a treatment plant. Most people aren't going to be sitting around at the dinner table saying, gosh, I wonder how much it costs to run tertiary treatment these days. People don't know, they don't really care. For most people, as long as it goes down the drain, doesn't come back up, that's as much as you want to know. And so what we wanted to do was say, well, if, let's say in the case of Palmdale and Lancaster, where they only have tertiary level treatment, and we're actually going to a higher level of treatment, and the cost is still lower, hopefully that says that we're doing some things correct, that we're doing some things efficiently. It wasn't intended to be a full comparison and or a justification for what rates are being set.
I know, but how about the sizes of both projects? That should be compared.
Well, in the case, yeah, and in the case of Palmdale, it's about a 15 million gallon treatment plant. So it's, you know, in Santa Clarita, we're treating about 20 million gallons a day. So it's reasonably comparable, not fully comparable. I mean, we included the city of LA, which mostly just has a secondary level treatment plant. They have ocean discharge. They treat probably on the order of 400 million gallons a day. You would think they would be much more, have a much greater economy of scale, and so their rates should be really low compared to what Santa Clarita should be charging. And in fact, you see that they're charging more. So again, yeah, there is some variance based on size, but we're trying just to give people at least some feel for what other agencies are charging. Is it perfect? No, not at all.
Yes, a comment and then a question. I'm Ed Dunn, and I'm a 44 resident of Canyon Country. When we came here in 1969, there was no state water project. There was no Castaic Lake Water Agency treatment plant. We now pay continuously all our lives for the state water project and for the Castaic Lake Water treatment plant. So the existing resident who had plenty of water with the groundwater in '69 did not need any of the state water. It was for growth. It is for growth, and we are paying for growth. Now, the other thing, you mentioned that the mandate, the federal mandate, is federal EPA, and of course we have a Cal EPA. The number seems to be the only thing that we must meet, this 100 number, that others have situations exactly like we do, streams that aren't as nice as ours or streams that are worse than ours, and they're raising avocados and strawberries successfully just like Ventura is, and they don't have to meet that number. So my question is, we got the federal EPA and we have the California EPA known as Cal-EPA. What part does Cal-EPA play in this problem we have with the river?
Okay, in terms of Cal EPA, they are broken up into a bunch of different divisions, one of which is the State Water Resources Control Board. And so again, it's the State Water Resources Control Board that looks at it from a state level and deals with all the water quality issues. And then under the State Water Resources Control Board are the 9 regional water quality control boards. So that's where Cal EPA fits into it.
Persons from our community that have traveled up to Sacramento to talk to the top board have asked, can this number be changed? And the people that are the top people say, yes, it can. Now, why are we not pursuing changing that number and all of this expense goes away? When I think of you drilling wells 2 miles deep, when I know what it costs to drill them 1,500 feet deep, because I've been on water boards, it's outrageous. It's insane. I don't think anybody outside the fence of the institution would even think of doing something like that. And yet we're going to go ahead with this project when all we have to do is change a number in Sacramento? Why aren't we really concentrating, getting the county and getting Santa Clarita and getting the residents, get everybody together to go after the board up there in Sacramento to change the number, and all this problem goes away.
Okay. I can't speak directly to what other people have said their conversations where I don't know specifically what questions they asked. I don't know specifically what some of the state board members may or may not have said. So I can't really comment too much on that. What I will comment on, and we won't go into great detail or we'll be here all night, we've actually, and I don't know that we have poster boards, but we do have, and they wanted me to plug this, we do have some handouts in the back that go through a lot of some of those issues. So, you know, feel free to come and get those and you can read about it. But this is not something we just said, oh, here's the limit, let's roll over and pay it. We've actually fought this thing for 10 to 15 years, where we've had multiple discussions with the regional board. We engaged in science issues. You know, there's been questions, is there science behind it? I mean, We had one of the things, and, you know, people are going to debate, there's people on both sides. What the Regional Water Board decided they would do is they allowed a panel of 6 scientists to be appointed. 3 of them basically came from the Ventura County Water Interest. 3 of them came from our side, so depending which side of the fence you're on, you're going to say 3 of them were biased no matter what. But there were 6 of them, some on each side. They got together. They did literature reviews of multiple studies that had been done. And pretty much what they decided, 4 out of the 6 came to the conclusion that a reasonable limit was between 100 and 117. One said, oh no, it could go up to 270, it can be way up here. And one said, oh no, it should be way less than 100. But the consensus was generally that it should be between 100 and 117. So that was one thing that the regional board looked at specifically when they were setting the limit. The other thing they look at is under the Clean Water Act and the Porter-Cologne Act, which is a California, sort of a California version of the Clean Water Act, that it says you're supposed to look at historic background levels of what's been in the various water bodies. And that should, you know, we don't want to cause any degradation, so you should have to meet the standards of those historic levels. And they have some samples, some of them going back, I believe, into the 60s, that they had chloride levels of 100 milligrams per liter. So they took that in combination with at least the 6 scientists saying in general it should be 100 to 117, and they came up with, okay, here's the standard. So from the standpoint of the state water or the regional water board, I think they would say, whether we agree with it or not, they think that they have the science behind them. In terms of, can you just say, well, let's request a new number? It's not quite as simple as that. There's a whole process that you have to go through. There's, you know, every regional water board develops what's called a basin plan, and those basin plans have to go through certain reviews, and there's, you know, it's a whole series of process. It's not as simple as just saying, oh, let's ask for the number and they're going to change it. You don't really get all of those options. Some of the options we looked at, the questions have been asked, well, why not? Let's just sue. Let's go to court. We'll take them to court, and the science is on our side, and we'll win. And we looked at that. We hired an outside legal firm that specialized in environmental law, went through our case, showed them what we believed, what the issues were, and their advice is that your likelihood of winning is slim to none, with slim not even having much of a chance, that the majority of the court records and the court cases that say that, yeah, you're not going to win, and the few that did win were mostly on procedural errors where they sent it back to the regional water board. They went through the process, corrected their procedural errors, and then immediately readopted the same standards that they had before. So typically the courts do not involve themselves in the technical matters because they're relying upon the water board as the technical experts to do that. They're only looking really at the procedural and administrative issues. So your chances of winning in court are slim, and the concern being that if you go to court, you're going to pay a lot of money in attorney fees, and then if you don't win, now you're out of compliance, and now you're going to pay fines, and now we're just paying a lot of money and getting absolutely nothing for it. And so our board of directors made a decision that said, we don't think it's prudent, we don't think it's a wise use of the public's money to go down this path and spend money fruitlessly, both to pay lawyers and then to pay fines and have nothing to show for it.
My question is, I have a couple questions, and when there's a 20 million gallon a day plant, how many gallons are in process between the inflow and the outflow?
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the question.
On a 20 million gallon a day plant,
Okay.
how many gallons are in process?
Well, and I'll give you a sort of two-part answer. In general, what comes in goes out. There's very little evaporation, there's very little wastage. That everything that comes in goes out. If you had something like an oxidation pond, which Palmdale and Lancaster had, where it goes into big ponds, and you sit in these ponds for 20 or 30 days and you have a lot of evaporation, you'd see a big difference between what comes in, what goes out. So pretty much, if you have 20 million gallons coming in, you're going to have 20 million gallons going out.
If somewhere in that plant there are a bunch of tanks, right? How many gallons are in the tanks?
I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know how big the tanks are. Generally, it takes about 8 to 12 hours to run through the plant. So I mean, I could get you if you want the technical details, I can get you the size of the tanks.
So maybe a third of the 20 million is in the
Okay.
middle. The other question I have is, specifically, how does the water board test the discharge? Is it you that does the testing and reports it? Do they test it? How do they test it? Is there a sump pit? Is it a lab test? Is it a continuous test where you, at any second you can know how many chlorides are passing out?
Okay, I'll give you sort of general answers. Yes, generally, and whether it be chlorides or any other things, I mean, we have to test for all sorts of things, heavy metals, organic content, solids content, turbidity, all sorts of things we have to test for. It is, right now, it's a self-monitoring program. We do the testing. There are times they will come out and we'll do dual samples and split the samples. They'll test it, we'll test it to ensure that it's all great. We have to it's got to be a state certified laboratory that you just can't, not just anybody can do it, so that you have to go to a certified laboratory. In terms of where the chlorides would be measured, what they're saying is that end of pipe, right before it goes into the river, that's where you would pull your sample. Depending on the permits, the way they do it, some things, again, depending if you have to pull samples, it's a lot of times it'll just be a daily sample. Other things that can be measured more without having to take samples, they can be measured digitally and electronically. They'll be continuously metered. So a lot just depends on exactly what how they specify it in the permit.
Okay. This is my last question. It occurred to me as you were talking about your averaging, your three-month averaging proposal, that if you could measure the chlorides instantaneously in the effluent stream and divert when you had high readings and store and then blend back when you had low readings, I was wondering how much storage might be needed and whether or not there was a testing process where you could, maybe it's an electrical resistance or something. 100 years ago when I was in high school, salt water conducts electricity and distilled water doesn't. So there may be some process tests that you can do practically to maybe divert the high chlorides, store them, blend them back in when they're lower. That's kind of where I was going with my
Okay,
first question.
I hesitate to answer that directly because I'm not an operations engineer, so I hesitate to say exactly how they're going to operate the plant. But Brian, you want to? This is just this is Brian Langpap. He's one of our the people who worked on the facility plan.
So the concept that you're describing is essentially what we'd get with the 3-month averaging program, where on the days where the chloride levels are high, maybe it's 110, we run at 110, but then other days we clean it up to down to 90, and so it all averages out. So we can essentially get the same benefit but not have to build expensive tankage on site.
Right. If they don't approve it, is that an alternate that might?
I think that's, yeah.
Reduce the size of the RO plant.
I think it's something we'd look at. The site is pretty space constrained, tankage is expensive, but I think that's something we'd look at.
And just to address your question about how much flow are in the tanks at any given point, typically when sewage comes in during the day, you think of it, everybody gets up in the morning and we take a shower, we fix breakfast, and lo and behold, the flows go up. And then everybody goes off to work, the flows come down. It gets to be 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, we get home, we cook dinner, the kids take their bath, the flow goes back up. Come 10 o'clock, we go to bed, the flows go down, and so the flows are up and down. What we actually have at our treatment plant is called the flow equalization tank, where we take the peaks, send them over to a storage tank. store them during the high peak periods, and then on the low flow periods, we bring those peaks back in. So the tanks are running very much in an even keel 24 hours a day, with the idea that having even flows makes the plant operate much more efficiently and hence is more economical.
Okay. Let's give Mr. President a hand.
Wait, do you have time for one more? Okay, one more question.
How you doing? I got a question. On our county tax bill, we pay a sewer maintenance fee, which I'm assuming that's where everything flows through to get to you guys, correct?
Yeah, what happens, and this is sort of archaic history from how things are set up. When the sewage comes out of your home, it goes to a sewer that runs down the street in front of your house. Depending if you're in the city, that line is typically owned by the city. If you're in the unincorporated area, it's owned by the county. They're the ones who own those collector sewers. They collect it, and then they dump it into our big trunk lines, into our treatment plants. So when you see a line that says consolidated sewer maintenance, that's the charge for those local sewers. That's not our charge, but it is for the local collector sewers. And typically, a lot of cities, instead of maintaining those collector sewers on their own, they contract with the County Department of Public Works, which operates this consolidated sewer maintenance district. On the tax bill, then you'll see a separate line that will say Santa Clarita Valley Sanitation District. That's the charge that we levy.
Okay, my question, and it might be apples and oranges, and I don't know if the citizens know, but the city of Santa Clarita right now is in the middle of scoping all the sewer lines to take over those charges and become a city charge. And the city of Palmdale just did this, and Lancaster, and it increased their tax by 300%. So on top of your tax, if you're paying, let's say, $40, now you're going to be paying another $160, depending on what your sewer charge is. And I've seen those trucks in the last 4 months scoping up and down every street. So I'm just not sure if the average citizen knows that our city is in the middle of trying to take over the county's part, and not only is this tax going to affect us, the sewer maintenance charge could go up to whatever our city council decides at that point to charge us.
Yeah, I would say exactly what you said. That right now, consolidated sewer maintenance charges about $45 a year. The majority of the cities that have taken over their own local sewers are generally have levied charges between $100 and $120 a year.
I have a house also in Palmdale, and it's gone up 300%. So my question is on top of your charge, on top of that charge, we're looking at about $650, $700 a year, which is well more than the 2% of our property tax that goes up currently. So on top of the open park space land, and top of all the other stuff. So it's really getting to the point where it's getting too expensive to live in the city of Santa Clarita. And I just don't know if anybody's seen these trucks, but pay attention. They're big yellow trucks, and they're scoping up and down all your streets. And I got videotape on our websites if you like to see it. And I just don't know if people know about it, and I think it's something important to be talking about. And I apologize if this isn't the right time, but if we're talking about raising our rates for water and taxes and sewers, this is part of the sewer system. So thank you.
Okay.
Let's give Mr. President a hand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, you're right. So there are services that the city contracts out, like the sheriff's department. We contract with the sheriff's department for services. There are other services in the city where we're in a district, a Proposition 218 district, like for fire services. We don't contract our fire services. We are in a district. So for sewer services, we are in a district right now. It's going to be very interesting because this is going to the city would have to withdraw from it, and I'll find out, and we'll get someone to come talk about that as well. Now, when it comes to this presentation this evening, I made a promise to these guys, and as soon as I get those two guys outside,
we'll make that happen. Can you ask them to go outside and have this conversation? So I made a promise to him that I wouldn't ask him a lot of questions tonight. I've been asking him lots of questions before. I didn't promise him I wouldn't editorialize a little bit of this after it was over. So we're going to go on June the 30th, and we're going to go to the public hearing, and I want to do exactly what they said, because I think in one case, it's like last time. Last time we analyzed things. They talk about the fact that I went and I supported them, and that's because I found out that in 2004 we got thrown under the bus by our directors who initiated a program without having money to pay for it, and then in 2008 had to come back and say, I need money. And by that time it was too late to stop. So yeah, I understood the process. Now in this case, we're talking about the difference between capital costs and operational costs. I consider operational cost anything it takes to run the existing facility. And capital costs, they keep telling us, is something that is for additional capacity. So I look at it this way. We have a water treatment plant that has a capacity of 27.5 million gallons a day. That's Saugus and Valencia combined. But our current capacity, the current usage, is 20 million gallons a day. Right? Everybody following me so far? And that means that 7.5 million gallons a day is additional reserve for the future, for hookups, right? Because you can't build a plant every time someone hooks up. So we got 7.5 million gallons a day of additional reserve. Now we're talking about a chloride project in 2012 dollars, we wouldn't want to change that, of $130 million. So if we're using 73, and that project at $130 million, you guys are back there, correct me if I'm wrong, is to make sure that 27.5 million gallons a day doesn't go over 100 milligrams per liter. So we're using about 73% of that capacity. We should only pay 73% of that money. All right, then it makes sense to me, if this is true, that we're going to pay 73% or $95 million, that other $35 million in reserve capacity should come out of the capital improvement fund. Ratepayers should not pay for reserve capacity. Reserve capacity should be paid for new users. And then it would make perfect sense to me what you said. If in fact we were taking that 73% and putting it on the existing ratepayers because it's not really additional capacity, it's a new requirement, and the 27% would come out of the capital improvement program because it's going to be paid for by new users coming on down the pipe, then it would make sense to me of what you said where you say, well, until the thing comes online, I'm not going to change the connection fees because the capital improvement fund is funding that additional capacity. So that's my bill. I feel that we're at a point now where our directors, I think, have let us down tremendously. All right? I know they don't like to hear that, but I think it's true. In 2005 was the time when the Regional Water Board said, enough. We have enough information. We don't have to go any farther. That doesn't mean we had to stop. That just meant that they wanted to proceed from that point. We could have continued on. And then we could have had plenty of real science to either say, you know, you guys were right, we're going to have to pay it, or no, you're wrong, we're going to go and see if we can get it changed. But we didn't do that. It's not these guys' fault, their staff. It's the three people that sit up on the dais that you're going to see on June the 30th. So at this point, we're kind of in no man's land. We're kind of in the point where, we're in a point where everybody is tired of listening to us trying to say, no, we're not going to do it, and sitting on our hands. I think we're going to have to propose the project. It's the only way it's going to happen. But when we propose it, I'm going to tell the guys sitting in that table that we should only have to pay for 73% of it. And the rest of it should come out of the capital improvement fund because it's reserve capacity. And let's do exactly what these guys just said. New users pay for stuff in the future. We pay for what we use today. Okay? That's my little editorialization.